I'm Holly Stevens. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Legal Services Corporation, and I'm excited to be here. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I was just so excited about medical legal partnerships. Before I joined LSC, I was at Children's Law Center, which has a large medical legal partnership, and we did data and evaluation work around that medical legal partnership for about 10 years. And so I'm so excited to be back with my MLP crowd and to share with you today. There are about 450 medical legal partnerships in the US right now. Some of them have been operating for more than 20 years, and yet we still call them innovative, when probably they should be the standard of care. And so we're excited today to talk more about what Georgia's medical legal partnerships look like and the structure, and tell you some client stories. And before we start, we're going to have an inspiring video, I think.
There was a case of a child that needed a heart transplant, and certain things needed to happen legally for the child to have the heart transplant.
The transplant team recommended that the mother needed to give guardianship to the grandmother because the mother was not, and understood that she was not financially stable to care for a child who had a heart transplant. That would be something that we could step in and help with. The mother was on board because she knew it was a life or death situation, and so we discussed an emergency modification of custody, and that entailed filing a petition, and if all the parties consented, getting a consent order. There was also a biological father in the picture. However, he was in jail, and so I went to the jail to get his consent because it was an emergency situation. I did not want there to be a holdup with the court system in regards to notifying the biological father. This was also the same day that a huge snowstorm was coming into Atlanta, and so I was trying to fight the snowstorm, and I made it to the jail and had the deputies there deliver the paperwork to the biological father, and because he'd been speaking to the mother, he signed off on everything as well.
And the child had the transplant. The child's alive. He's got a beating heart. You can think about what an incredible thing that is. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta is inviting lawyers into the hospital. There's a doctors' foundation in which doctors contribute to a fund. And through our work at HELP and Children's Healthcare, they've decided to use the doctor's own money to help fund a position for a year, a staff attorney. The power of a legal document that we can do routinely, that we have the expertise to do routinely, and that we can get to help someone, it was just profound.
MLPs have a evidence base that's building from research that it's increasing patient health, decreasing costs, and increasing kind of knowledge of both lawyers and medical partners that are participating in these MLPs. And so today we're excited to welcome Malik Hines, staff attorney from the Georgia Legal Services Program. We have two MLPs, one that's more than 6 years old, and the one Malik is from is just celebrating its 1-year anniversary, I believe. That's with McKinney Medical Center, and that's a Health Resources and Services Administration, I always get that wrong, HRSA funded, federally qualified health center in Waycross, Georgia, Ware County. And I don't know where that is, but I'm told that that is the southeastern corner of the state. So we're excited to learn more about that. And then we have Catherine Morris and Dr. Stan Sonu from the Health Law Partnership, which is quite a long-standing partnership. I think y'all have been around for about 17 years. 20 years. And Catherine is a staff attorney, and Dr. Sonu is the medical director, as part of the medical director for the Child Advocacy and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and also the assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at Emory University School of Medicine, and is a primary care provider. Probably the most fun job there on that list, right?
Yes.
So why don't we start with the why? Why don't you tell us a little bit, let's center this in the people that you work with, and tell us about an example of the collaboration between medical and legal teams that had a significant impact on your children or family's well-being. Malik, should we start with you?
Okay. So I think one big example is the way it works is just like the video described, the novelty to most of our clients is, oh, wow, there's an attorney at the medical center or at the hospital. And I think that's a very big thing because the access to attorneys is so scarce in the communities that I serve. My office, the Brunswick Regional Office, we serve about 17 counties, and we are very few and far between, absolutely. Another big thing is they're just very happy that we're free, or at least reduced cost legal services for some of those instances. I would say the medical legal partnership, one big example, of one of my clients, she was just getting a regular checkup, but the doctor noticed some bruises on her arms and, her body. So the doctor asked my client, would she like to talk to an attorney about everything? With domestic violence survivors, speaking about their story is one of the barriers to them coming forth just because, reliving that trauma is, traumatizing, of course. So thankfully, though, she consented to coming to my office, and, she was actually my first temporary protective order that I did. So, that's just one big example of how it comes from doctors to me. And that's just one good example.
That's a great example of how to leverage the trust between the doctors and the lawyers.
Absolutely.
Catherine and Dr. Sonu, an example from your MLP?
Well, Dr. Sono is making me tell the story, but it was this. I think one of the cases that really impacted us a lot emotionally in our unit. It was a young woman, or young lady, girl. She was 10. She had sickle cell, which is a lifelong disease. The mother called up, freaking out because they were worried about their child's health, but also the financial stability of the family, and that Medicaid had turned down the bone marrow transplant that the doctors had recommended, which would have cured her sickle cell. The sickle cell bone marrow transplant, I've since learned, is it's almost like lightning in a bottle. You have to have the perfect donor, and everybody has to be the perfect age. And she had a sister who was the perfect age, and she was the perfect age. And they were a perfect match, and it was, the doctors were so excited to even have this option. And they did a lot of testing, pre-operative testing to make it happen, multiple MRIs. It went so far as going out of state for a fertility preservation procedure, which was the MRIs were all covered by the Medicaid carrier, and even the fertility preservation was partially covered, all to prepare her for this bone marrow transplant. And then the mother got a letter saying, because you don't have severe sickle cell, because you haven't had a stroke, and because you're not in organ failure, we're denying the bone marrow transplant. This little girl was, I'm told, heading down that path, but had the disease been allowed to progress to that path, the bone marrow transplant would not have been successful because she would have been older, she would have been compromised, and the doctors really, they wrote the most beautiful letters to the insurance carrier Medicaid carrier before we were even involved. I mean, talk about building your case for you. As we all know as lawyers, usually the hardest part is building the case, right? As litigators, the doctors did it. They built the case. It was right there, and they handed it to us. But they weren't able to affect the reversal of the decision of the Medicaid carrier. So we, with a lot of help with a lot of people, legal aid, Pam Cradler, my boss, Charlie Bliss was involved. We submitted a fair hearing request to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and it took about a month of us. Then the Medicaid carrier hired an attorney who we knew, so we were going back and forth with him talking, and he's a reasonable guy. And then about a month after we filed the fair hearing request, we got word. Okay, and by the way, as we were pulling their documents, they had incorrect diagnoses in the paperwork. There was it hadn't been processed in a efficient way by the Medicaid carrier in making that assessment. So anyway, I think I told the lead, in the beginning, she got the sickle cell transplant in the end because we were able to file that fair hearing appeal. And I think that the thing that makes it such a great case is so many, I came from private practice. So many times when you're doing this kind of work, working with doctors, there's so many barriers. I'm sure Malik can say this too, to
Absolutely.
getting to the doctors. You know what I mean? There's a lot of gatekeepers, there's a lot of general counsels out there, but in a medical legal partnership, we have such great access to the doctors. And these doctors were the ones calling us and saying, help us with this situation. And so because of that partnership, because of the trusted relationship, this little girl was able to get her bone marrow transplant, and I'm told is doing quite well. So that was a happy day for us.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I do want to underscore that without this bone marrow transplant, this child is headed for literally a lifetime of pain and complications and different kinds of organ failure. I'm also an adult physician. I work at Grady, and I work on the sickle cell unit sometimes, and I'm caring for those 20 to 40-year-olds who have sickle cell disease who didn't get a chance to have a bone marrow transplant. So what Catherine is sharing is no small feat. Not only did it basically change this child's entire health trajectory, but imagine the millions of dollars saved as well to the health system. And the second thing I want to underscore here is the physicians were extremely dedicated to this patient's care, but they had no idea of what it would take to navigate through the weeds of Medicaid, state Medicaid policy, and who to contact and proceedings and this and that. So it wasn't for lack of passion, it was an educational and experiential barrier. And I think this example really highlights why MLPs are so critical, why they sit in a niche that cannot be replicated, why physicians can never do what happened in this case. The case I want to share is a recent one, and it reflects some of the educational aspects of our partnership. We also partner with Georgia State College of Law, and they have a help clinic or medical legal partnership clinic for their students. And a few weeks ago, the students were busy preparing a case for a child who has cystic fibrosis, who was starting to experience more complications. This child had just come out of the toddler years, and the family was very economically challenged, needed equipment that they couldn't afford, that Medicaid wasn't paying for directly, and the family had applied for SSI and were denied. And the family had appealed and were unsuccessful there. And so the students got together with the law students got together with our medical students, and Lisa Bliss and myself, we overseed some of their research and preparations. And what we basically saw was it was apparent that the SSI department, I don't even know what to call it, the entity over there, did not seem to have the appropriate, most up-to-date paperwork. They were actually making their decision based on paperwork submitted when the child was a couple months old, and only a few months old. And this child, with cystic fibrosis, complications they tend to accumulate over time. So it made sense why they wouldn't approve it then. Long story short, we resubmitted with an affidavit solicited from the child's pulmonologist, lung specialist, and they had the hearing, I think, a few weeks ago. They were persuasive to the judge. The judge not only agreed to approve SSI for the family, but agreed to back pay from the point of birth to the present. So it was a really successful outcome, and it taught these students what it means to advocate, and you could just hear from them, you could feel their energy of how satisfying it was to be a part of something like this, where they felt like they were meaningfully participating, not just in a justice-related issue, but something that actually affected the health and the well-being of the child and an entire family.
Thank you for sharing those stories. So always great to hear kind of about the partnerships themselves and who it's benefiting and who we're here to serve. And at the same time, all MLPs look very different. They serve different populations, they have different funding sources, there's different medical partners and legal partners. Can you guys get in the nuts and bolts a little, tell us how your MLPs are structured?
Okay. Catherine, if you don't mind me starting again. So my medical legal partnership, basically 2 days out of the week, I head to the McKinney Medical Center located in Waycross, Georgia. They also have, a lot of different offices in Folkston, sorry for looking at my notes, Folkston, Alma, Kingsland, and Nahunta, Georgia. So I basically just go there and do my office hours for the day in the McKinney Medical Center, and there is no real referral structure from the patient's perspective except for the doctor. So it's completely walk-in. A lot of things in rural community, they get spread by word of mouth. So there's a free attorney at the medical center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is the premise for how a lot of my clients have come to me. But we also do a lot of promotion in the newspaper in Waycross. So I think one of the big things is the structure is the community partners itself. Obviously, I'm the staff attorney working there, but Mr. Ira Foster and Rachel Henderson are the two progenitors of this project, along with the Medical Legal Partnerships Medical Center, their chair, Ms. Ola Smith. So they really come together and make, the funding and everything happen. But in terms of the ground level, that's my job to sort of advocate for my clients. And a lot of times I'm going out into the community, to the senior center, to a food market, just to kind of put our face out there, because some of them never even know that there's a free attorney in existence until they talk to me. I spoke a little bit about how the doctor referrals work. So those are, obviously confidential. If a patient chooses not to be referred to me for whatever reason, because in that same sense, they may not feel comfortable coming forward with their issue right now in terms of domestic violence and such, then nothing happens. But if they do, then they get referred to me, and we start the intake process from there. I already get a glimpse of what the legal problem will be, and that helps me a lot, but it also helps my clients from not having to reiterate everything that's going on with them. I've done a podcast before on Facebook just to get me out there. So really, in terms of advertising and advocating that I'm at the medical center, that is bought with a lot of good faith and, social capital with the community partners. So 2 days out of the week I'm there, but obviously during the other days I'm able to come to the McKinney Medical Center. One of our paralegals mans a different medical legal partnership. She mans a different office for McKinney Medical Center. And she does a lot of intake there, but she also will do a lot of intake for me in terms of if there's a will that needs to be executed or drafted, I will drive to Folkston and do that with her. So we have a very good system of being in the rural communities that are far away, because most of the areas that I'm serving are about 2 hours or at least 1 hour away from our Brunswick Regional Office, which is where I'm at mostly.
Thanks, Malik. How about health? You guys have a very interesting structure with a lot of people involved. How does it work?
You want to say, or should I say?
Go ahead.
We have 3 legs to our medical legal partnership. We are Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and Georgia State College of Law. And we have an attorney at every one of the CHOA campuses. Not every one, I shouldn't say. We have one at Hugh Spalding, Arthur Blank, CAB. I'm at Center for Advanced Pediatrics. And Scottish Rite has our main office with our legal director, Pam Cradler. And we get all of our referrals from the hospital. A lot of it's phone calls from parents that doctors and social workers have referred to us. We do distribute and try to do outreach within the hospitals. We're starting to do some outreach as well in the community at some, I went to a Sickle Cell Foundation event. I'm going to be going to a disability nonprofits fair in January to talk about our MLP. But I think it's amazing that you are able to handle everything that walks in the door in your office hours.
And we turn down a lot of cases as well,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's just a criminal matter, and we don't do criminal matters or DUI or something, but at least a place for them to know somebody is there to talk to is kind of what we try to make the McKinney Medical Center be.
Yeah, and because of the partnership with Georgia State, we're also really lucky to get a lot of data on our program, which is amazing. But what do you have to add, Dr.
Well,
Simon?
on our side, most of our physicians and trainees have been educated on the topic of social determinants of health. I think, and I want to sidebar real quick, and we have to give credit to our founders, Bob Pedagano and Sylvia Cayley, who very courageously in the early 2000s, when there weren't many MLPs around, advocated to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, or what would become Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, to start an MLP. And that was because Bob Pedagano, who is this hardened PICU doctor with an handlebar mustache, was sick and tired of seeing children come in the sickest of presentations, when the root cause and the root cause would be something socially preventable, and so it was really his passion from the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta side that inspired this widespread education on the importance of social determinants of health. So our physicians and our providers and our social workers are all trained to recognize when there is a health-harming social issue, specifically a health-harming legal need. And we've done a lot of work over the years to raise awareness about HELP. And so if I'm in primary care and I'm seeing a child and the parent expresses an issue about housing, let's say the child has some kind of immunodeficiency or poorly controlled asthma, and they live in Section 8 housing with broken plumbing, maybe there's mold that's starting to form under the sink or in the bathroom, that's a flag for me to say, okay, have you talked to the landlord? Yes, but they haven't responded, the property hasn't responded, and then that triggers me to then refer the family to HELP, and they hear the case. We do case acceptance rounds every Wednesday, and then we go from there. So it's really a partnership that has just worked in the past 2 decades, and I think what the thread that kind of holds everything together is just a mutual passion to serve families and children. I'll say, as a physician, I never thought I'd have this much face time with lawyers, and it's like oil and water, doctors and attorneys. If I had to be in a room of lawyers, though, I guess it would be this room. But yeah, it's a great partnership, and I know from firsthand experience, many of our physicians are very appreciative that HELP even exists. And so one of our larger goals is to see an MLP across every health system, or at least available to every health system in this state. And I think there's a lot of growing support for that.
If I could just add one other element to our MLP that I can't believe I forgot, is we do have an in-service education program where we will come and speak to the clinicians about different topics. So for example, tomorrow I'm giving a continuing education talk to the social workers at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta on special education, which is one of the areas we do a lot of advocacy in. So to really kind of help them pass on information to the families as they're talking to them. And I have to tell you, when you're getting your referrals from doctors and social workers across a huge medical system, the quality of the referrals that we get is shockingly good. I mean, these clinicians are really well educated about what we can help with and what we can't help with. So it's an important factor in making it work efficiently, I think. And we learn so much from them at our case acceptance meetings, because we'll get calls from families with these complicated medical conditions, and we're like, we don't even know what that is. To like, you know what I mean? To start to, and we have Dr. Sonu and his colleagues to educate us.
I just want to note that if we can bring even a small percentage of the energy and commitment that Bob Pedagano can bring to something, if you all know Bob, we're doing a good job. I wish he was here. He's such a great advocate and character, and Sylvia as well. I'm going to skip around because I know we have a lot of questions, but Dr. Sanders, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So last spring, Georgetown University released a study, and in Georgia, more than 300,000 children were dropped from the Medicaid rolls. Have you seen this in your client population? How has it impacted? Do you have to work on enrollment as well as all of the healthcare issues with the medical legal partnership? How has this impacted you?
Last year, I saw a family who is primarily Spanish speaking, and the child hadn't been seen, I think, in a year, and it was odd because the child was very young. So we hadn't seen the child from like 9 months till 2 years. And I saw the child, and towards the end of the visit, the mother had said, "I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see you in the time frame that you've asked us to follow up." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I can't seem to renew my Medicaid." And she said, "I've tried online, it won't let me through." And so I said, let me see your phone and I'll try. And I typed in all her information and it still wouldn't go through. I called our social worker and I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And so our social worker tried and she couldn't get through. And so in addition to some of the just a lot of families but being unable to renew their Medicaid, the process is clunky, and the process has been itself a barrier to re-enrolling families. This is, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it's a disaster for population health. There's so much evidence out there that has demonstrated the benefit of health insurance, health coverage for children especially. It is the number of touch points that a pediatric provider has with a child and family in those first 5 years of life outshines any other touch point with any other professional entity. For example, for an infant, I see that infant at the newborn visit, 1 month, 2 month, 4 month, 6 month, 9 month, 12, 15, 18, 2, 2.5, 3, and that's almost 10 visits right there. All of those visits are opportunities to catch developmental delays, to ask about social needs, to not just address the physical health concerns, but think holistically, or think about that child's health holistically. And all of those touch points has been demonstrated through research to prevent or really alter developmental trajectories of the child. So there's this one study that was done out of Iowa where they took mothers who had achieved a high school education or below, and they compared those mothers who had insurance coverage and those who didn't. And for those families who had insurance coverage, their children's reading levels and educational preparedness was better, far better than those children who came from families who didn't have that health coverage. And the only difference between these families, we're controlling for the maternal education, the only difference was insurance coverage in the last 5 years. And so there's all kinds of indirect benefits with insurance coverage, with those touch points, with the pediatric provider. It's not just about preventive medicine, but it's really about holistic care. And these days, pediatricians, we're trained to assess educational outcomes because educational outcomes, speech, language, social skills, fine motor development, gross motor development, these are all markers and signals of health, again, in that holistic sense.
I think MLP is one of the things that you're talking about a lot here, and that the field talks about is this preventative lawyering too, these opportunities missed to set up the child or other patient and families for success. Malik, I wonder what you're seeing in the population that you serve in a more rural community, and not just with a pediatric population. How does that look in your community?
So I think in rural communities, just in general, research shows that rural communities are, older, but also have less access to healthcare and also tend to be more economically, disenfranchised. And that is what I see in a lot of my clients. The majority of my clients are more in the senior range, but also their technology savviness is a lot different from people who may be in the same economic situation, but they live somewhere like Atlanta. I would think one of the main things is just the colloquial understanding of the law is a lot different in the rural communities, because now in Atlanta, at least, kind of everybody has an idea of what lawyers do, and they at least have some theories from Law and Order and everything like that. But it's very much brand new to most of my clients what I'm even talking about or what the situation is. I'm from North Carolina, so I'm from the South, but obviously Georgia is a little bit more South. And I think one of the things I learned that came with that was what this work will require of me, but also what it will require of my clients. It requires a lot of bravery of them to even come talk to an attorney, because every legal thing they've ever done has been negative in their view. You know, it might have been an eviction attorney who they didn't have somebody, or it might have just been, lawyers know we have a bad rap in society in general. So, crossing that barrier, but also, for me, it took a lot of empathy for me, not necessarily that I felt a different way about it, but just that they're not being apathetic or lazy when they're being paralyzed by their situation. I remember just one quick anecdote before I, pivoted back. One client came to me and he said he got a letter and it was like something legal, and I was like, okay, well, what does it say? And I was just, tell me what it says. And then I realized he could not tell me what it says because he could not read it. And he was a man older than I was, so that made me take a step back from law school, undergrad, all the high school and schooling that I've done, and understand that, like, some of my clients are at a situation where they really cannot help themselves in that basic sense. So, now I'm reading all the letters and making sure that everybody understands, but I think they appreciate a lot more of how I can take it down from the law school level and just tell them, like, here's what the situation is legally, in a way that they can understand, because a lot of times my clients just feel like they're being swept away with the system. We have so many deadlines and stuff where they might have just defaulted on a divorce because they didn't answer fast enough, or because they got too nervous about the Social Security deadline, they never even did anything with it, and it's been passed already, so they can't appeal. So understanding that it's a lot different for them to even come to me helps me a lot, because I understand now, like, I have to appraise where they are in their journey so I can appraise how I can help them, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Malik. We won't have any data on that core relationship and trust, but one thing we know about MLPs is this focus on data with healthcare partners. And philanthropy leaders also are caring more and more about investing their dollars. What are they getting for their money? How, especially with the health partnership and the law school and all of the partners and researchers that you have, what data are you all collecting so that you can demonstrate the impact, so that you can tell the story, hopefully build funding and stakeholders and support?
Yeah.
We start with medical, then we'll start with legal data.
Well, at the Health Law Partnership, one thing that we're really proud of, it's kind of a feather in our cap, is the research and evaluation infrastructure and commitment over time. And I think that's been a big part of why our partnership has been able to sort of crystallize and fashion its identity as a part of the health system, at least from my side of things. We have a very robust evaluation process. We partner with the Georgia Health Policy team and are collecting data all the time. So we collect data at the client level, not just with client outcomes, but client satisfaction. What was the process like for you? Any suggestions there? We definitely track healthcare dollars saved or healthcare utilization. We look at that from different angles. So one data point I can give you is that in 2023, for the 40 or so families who we had 12 months of before help data and 12 months of post-help data, before the inpatient cost on aggregate for those 40 families was about $2 million before they got plugged in with help. In the 12 months after help, the aggregate cost was $200,000. So help wasn't the only difference that happened in those families' lives, but it certainly contributed, again, to addressing those more upstream causes that continue to get people sick, and especially children who might have a chronic condition. So we're tracking healthcare dollars saved, and that's like music to, leadership's ears. When they hear that, they kind of sign everything. We also track data on the provider level, making sure that providers are informed in how to make appropriate referrals. One thing that trips providers up all the time is guardianship, and because we learn nothing about guardianship in medical school. I just thought there was one type of guardianship. I didn't know there was supported decision-making and all of these other levels of guardianship that existed. So on the aggregate, we pull all of these evaluation metrics into an annual summary, and then from there, we look through the data to say, where can we improve? Where are our gaps in our reach? Where can we better educate our stakeholders, and how can we persuade potential funders to get on our vision? Like I said, we want to grow. We don't want to just grow within our organization and our capacity within Children's Healthcare Atlanta, but we really, because we have firsthand seen the benefit of an MLP and how much it can impact the families' lives, we want to see this really extend beyond our health system borders across the entire state of Georgia. So we think that this data can really move the needle on that.
Well, of course, we enter all of our LSC outcomes into legal server. So that's one way of tracking things. But also, we're so lucky to have the partnership with Georgia State, where they follow any family that is willing to participate in the study, and we ask them at intake if they're willing to participate, and it's completely involuntary, gets a call or an email from Georgia State to see how effective we were at our representation. And of course, we track the kinds of disabilities that or diagnoses that the children were, because we're a pediatric MLP, the children coming through our program have, what kind of cases we have, and Georgia State does a beautiful job analyzing that data for us.
Catherine, do you feel like you all are engaging in that same process on the medical side to kind of review your practices and try to learn from them on the legal side?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're definitely, it's like, we all think we're doctors too now, pretty much.
You are, that's right, yes. Malika, as a growing MLP, are you guys incorporating data and learning into your process?
Absolutely. So I, get my wonderful regional operating manager, Marika Leroy, to, make a panel, I guess a table for me just so I can kind of see, after we do our LSC time, of course. So as of now, from September to January, and I just started with Georgia Legal Service Program last July, I've seen about 60 people at the McKinney Medical Center, and that's on top of my usual caseload that I have, outside of that. Of course, that's anybody who comes in for whatever reason, so we do have it to where, who I've served. So around that number is about 35 closed cases about there. About 10 of them were cases that we just don't do. I know two DUIs where, we just don't do those, and some criminal things, but also some issues where their legal, their legal situation wasn't something we could remedy. So those are kind of the ways where we miss people or we end up having to reject or just kind of do a counsel and advice letter. But in terms of, just in general, the work that we do in terms of helping people get on the public benefits is a benefit to the taxpayers at the long run that they see. I don't know the specifics of those numbers, but I do a lot of food stamp applications that I've helped people with. Even though that is technically outside of legal representation, I think these jobs negatively get typecast as social work attorney work, but I think in that kind of jab at it lies the beauty of what we actually do, where we help people in ways that aren't just going to court with them. I've had a lot of seniors where, hey, can you just send an email to somebody for me because I don't know if they're going to honor my warranty request versus yours. And sure enough, the tub company 100% did when I sent the letter. Or really they just want somebody to explain a letter to them that they got from the Food Stamp Corporation about, they really do make too much money to get food stamps, but they wanted somebody to explain it to them just so they weren't, being cheated out of the benefits that they deserve. So, in terms of the actual numbers, I've seen about 65 people just coming in and out of the McKinney Medical Center this year. But in terms of the dollars, I think for our individual clients, it's invaluable for them just to have me there. But of course, we do get, Social Security, SSI, determinations where they get, an amount of money, even though those aren't necessarily livable wages all the time, but any amount really does help our clients at that level. Even a $200 food stamp, application, that goes a long way for some of my clients who they wouldn't have had any way to get food without that. So that's all I have kind of say about numbers.
Yeah, I think any way of thinking about it at the beginning is so helpful, just as you establish the partnership. To close out our conversation, we're running out of time already, and we could stay up here and chat all day. What advice would you give to people who are starting an MLP or want to get involved in pro bono, or doctors, people who are on the edge, not too sure? What parting remarks would you like to leave the audience with?
Okay, I'll go first. So I would, obviously just the importance of what our role does, just because a lot of times, one of the barriers is having to go to another place, having to go from this building to this building or this street to this street. And the way that somebody can easily have their, medical situation checked out and then walk 10 feet and then get, talk to me and I help them with their eviction, that makes a world of difference to the clients. I think in terms of, entities and other people trying to start these sorts of medical legal partnerships, understanding the value of it comes, on the back end through a lot of investment, but for the clients and the people, it's immediate. And that's what I would say.
I mean, I could not agree with you more, Malik. It's the smallest, we think maybe is such a small impact is a huge impact to them. I think that, HELP has been around 20 years, way before anybody up here's involvement. Some of the people out in the audience were around for it, but I think having stakeholders at the highest level be on board and want it and driving things, because there are going to be significant things barriers to making it happen. Navigating patient confidentiality, navigating technological difficulties as far as combining medical record systems, and it's a complicated partnership. It's like cats and dogs. They're just not used to being with each other, and they think about things very differently. And I think when you have buy-in from the top, you're able to overcome some of those barriers.
One of the design features of our social system is we're in silos. And healthcare and certainly the justice system are siloed from each other. And I think the first case, going back to that first case that Catherine shared, it's such a poignant example of why if we want to do the best for our families, we cannot operate in silos. So I think the one piece of advice, so I have, I know I look like I'm 21, but I've been in this field since 2011. And the reason I came into medicine was to care for the underserved and be a part of caring for underserved communities. I have experimented or I've done research in different aspects of this, screening for social determinants, trauma-informed care, and I have not experienced something as tangibly productive as an MLP. There is data, it's research-backed, it is interprofessional, it works, it saves money, it sort of checks all those boxes. And so we are, I think, in a position for MLPs across the country to take this to scale and really appeal to even payers, insurance providers. Hey, let's think about an MLP because it can actually save your MCO, your ACO money in the long run. So I think my one piece of advice is the story tells itself. So tell the story, cast the vision, and the people who are passionate about this and the work of justice and caring for families will come out of the woodworks. There's, like I said, research, data, infrastructure, there's training, all the pieces are there, but we need people to to be the laborers and reap the harvest.
Thank you. I think on that note, kind of removing the barriers and the silos, I don't think anyone could have said it better. It's got something for everyone, data, research, great stories, and great clients and doctors and professionals involved. Please join me in thanking the panel. And